I hear myself on a repeat as well, so I will sometimes maybe speak a little slower if I catch myself talking. But thank you very much for having me here. I will be talking to you about the aesthetics of cozy games. I have, and I will come back to that at the very end, but I have currently, I'm editing currently a special issue on cozy games, so if you're interested in that, let me know, and I will forward you to the Google papers. And please forgive me, I just hit the allergy season, so my voice and my coughing is going to be getting in a way a little bit. Okay. Let's see, hopefully it works. Yes. So the first question, right, that we going to talk about is what even are cozy games. And as with anything that tries to be a genre of any sort, it is a little bit difficult because many different games have the name cozy game slapped on top of it, right? So, so even from this slide, some games that you are probably very familiar with, some maybe less, but there's also beauty of cozy games, that many of them are going to be very, very tiny indie games that just pop up and you have to dig for them a little more and then fall in love with them. So from even this one picture, you can see quite a big difference between games like Stardew Valley that are more farm-oriented, farming-oriented, Spiritfarer connects a lot of things. The teacups at the bottom left with a tiny cute frog is more linear narrative, or even, paparazzi, where you are literally a paparazzi for dogs. And what connects all these games are some of the elements that are happening in them more often maybe than in the others, we'll say, or is it a matter of aesthetics, which is all the other kind of yes. So some of the things at first coming from again this very small selection of games are games that are going to have some recurring themes, because for some reason we all look at the games and we can almost definitely say, oh yeah, that looks cozy, that is probably a cozy game. So farming, we try to understand here very generally, broadly, as farming, gardening, collecting plants and making them grow and herding animals and so on and so on. It's going to be a very common part of that, right? Here, of course, it's one of the games that is probably maybe not the most characteristic example of that, but because we categorized Farmville maybe a little different than other digital games, but that's a different story/problem. So a lot of farming, a lot of collecting things, which I will get back to that later, is kind of important as well. A lot of themes recurring around food, which is something that I personally find very, very interesting, because I do have a book on food in video games, and that is like one of the things that I am interested in personally. This is from Breath of the Wild, which is not necessarily fully cozy, but has definitely a lot of cozy aesthetics in it. And again, Spiritfarer, the view of the kitchen and some of the cooking in it. Very often in cozy games, right, there's going to be the elements of, again, gathering food, growing your own food, preparing your own food, cooking your own food, and so on and so on. Story, and I mean here both a focus on a story and being story-driven, but also a very specific type of a story that's usually very soft, very not necessarily very dramatic, but as I will show later, of course, there are cozy games that do focus on grief and depression, like Greece. That is in the middle right now. At the end, my last line is the list of all the games that I'm showing here. So I didn't put the titles on the board, but I will stop for a moment if you will be interested in that as well. Here an example from Monster Prom, which is a dating simulator, but also kind of to draw your attention to yet. Like I talked about farming simulators, right? There's going to be food management games and so on and so forth, but also, of course, story-driven games. But that has to mean also dating simulators, visual novels, all of this sort of stuff. And a very important thing, probably the first that comes to mind when you think cozy game and how you make to come to the conclusion that this game probably is cozy, is a general, broadly understood cuteness, which in itself I think is very interesting thing, as it's not that often focused on somehow. I mean, we say, again, cuteness, but we just assume that we all know what cuteness is and what cuteness means. So when we're talking about cozy games, we usually use or go back to the same manifesto of cozy games, which is written by Daniel Cook after a think tank workshop on cozy games, and it is a very nice text that goes more from the game development point of view of how to achieve coziness. Sorry, well, I maybe a little more theoretical than what I'm talking about. And the three tenets of coziness that he talks about are safety, abundance, and softness. And I will show you and talk a little more about these, since I find them, this is kind of the starting point of understanding what is coziness. How do we understand what coziness is? The first tenet, safety, and that's probably one of the most important, as it differentiates for us cozy games from other non-cozy games, from mainstream games, from generally understood other non-cozy games. And when we talk about safety, this is more of a narrative, but also very importantly ludic idea of basically a lack of threats in the game world, enemies, time restrictions. Doesn't mean that there cannot be any time restrictions. The top picture is a Cozy Grove game, which, as the name suggests, very cozy. You go, you collect things, but also, as you can see on the top right part, you do get time-restricted quests, but there are no significant penalties for missing that. So I'm thinking more of lack of tasks that put a time pressure on you, right? Or lack of any time pressure or pressure in general. So in general, that's gonna also mean accessibility. I'm putting probably you maybe recognize the last picture is from Animal Crossing, a poor avatar fainting at the sight of tarantula. And that in Animal Crossing, a very cozy game, of course, fainting would be one of the only ways of manifesting distress. So if attacked, is that kind of like in Pokemon, instead of dying, losing progress, the character faints and has to only backtrack a little bit, doesn't lose a lot of things and so on. So there might be penalties, but they are not very big, not very difficult to bear for the player, right? And another example of unpacking a game with literally no big stakes. You just unpack your next rooms. So safety here means no enemies that will come attack you, as opposed to what we consider the mainstream games being, the mass media, right, consider the games to be as combat-based, fast-paced, very, very difficult, and so on. And cozy games would not have these elements. In terms of, I said that safety means both ludic, lack of threats, but also story, and that kind of brings the question of whether it's cozy or wholesome, or there's a difference. And Wholesome Games being the company that every year does Wholesome Direct that lists all the cozy games, and the Wholesome Games becoming really kind of a synonym of coziness. And an interesting thing about cozy games for me is that while the name is very commonly now used, but less commonly maybe in strict academia, and more commonly in the industry and game journalism and so on, and in tax and etc. etc. But wholesome games being the place usually also to look for cozy games. But I think wholesome games also very nicely, intuitively describes the idea of the narrative, of the theme behind them. Second important tenet is abundance, and that means usually abundance of resources. So unlike survival games or action-based games where there is scarcity of something, you have to look for food or medicine or potions or whatever. In cozy games, the lack of stress comes from the fact that you basically have everything. And that is very well and very nicely visible again in the food-themed games. So in, I put the, again, Spiritfire, but on the right you put the famous fishing minigame that has to happen always. But also means that if you want something, it is very easy to gather it. In cooking games, like Cooking Mama, you have all the ingredients. You don't have to worry about that. You do have to. Cooking Mama is an interesting example. There is some time restrictions and some penalties, but abundance, right? So you're not lacking for things. And finally, the third one, softness. Softness will have many meanings from general aesthetic visuals, soft colors, soft shapes, the roundness, the cuteness, and so on, but also lack of aggressive pop-ups or, I don't know, music that is aggressive in a way. So we have accessibility here again, and a very broadly understood softness, melatonin on the left, Urdu on the right with a WS from Wood is an upcoming game. And why this is interesting is because the idea that Cook also talks about already is that the reason that we are so drawn to cozy games is that other non-cozy games rely on our need from the lower levels of needs, right? So if we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of course, Maslow, after he made it, he designed it, he rebuffed it, and there are some problems with that from the psychological point of view. It's not exactly how we work. It's not that set in stone that you cannot fulfill. The idea is that you cannot fulfill higher needs unless you fulfill lower. This is a little less linear, but as a general idea, and it's like a very, very basic premise, right? That first you have to fulfill your physiological needs for air, water, food, shelter, safety needs of security, then only you can start thinking about higher needs. In the idea that if you're starving and dying of the cold outside, you're not going to be wondering about your self-actualization in that moment. That has to be fulfilled for you to start craving intellectual stimulation and so on. And the idea for the cozy games is that inside the world of the games, for the player and for the character before the player, all of the physiological needs are taken care of. You are safe, you have shelter, you have a lot of love around you, you have abundance of products, resources, food, whatever you want to think about. And so you can start taking care of the higher needs and fulfill what you might be lacking otherwise. And in a way, the popularity of cozy games that responds to just a little bit changing needs of the world. We don't maybe need necessarily to be heroes who save the world all the time because the world is in shambles. So we are drawn to the narratives that are calmer, that are safer, that give us what we are missing in the current situation. Yeah, and in the article that I wrote with Martina Bakun, we consider that, okay, this is all great, but also not exhaustive about how coziness shows up in games. And we discuss about three, because apparently, you know, the dramatic categories comes in the three, right? Both comedy, dramatic. You need to have threes. So we have also three functions of coziness. Functions maybe is not buzzword here, but kind of 3 ways of describing a relationship between the cozy aesthetics and the themes otherwise in the game. And we have coherent, dissonant, and situational elements. And the game is The Last Campfire. That is going to be an example of a bit of a dissonant one. So the first one, coherent, is the most intuitive one and the one that is probably the easiest to, the most intuitive, the one that it's, easiest to understand its meaning is when we have cozy aesthetics that accompany a cozy message or a theme. And this is usually the games that we just generally think about as cozy when we are presented with them, a game that we look at, and absolutely everything about it screams cozy. It has safety, it has abundance of everything, it has no threats whatsoever, apart from an odd tarantula that makes us faint, but not a big deal. It is cute. It is relaxing. It's great, and if it has a story, because it doesn't have to have really robust story as well, the story is not threatening either. So of course, Animal Crossing, and the reason why New Horizons coming in March, I believe, 2020, made such a big impact on everyone, because what I said, exactly in the moment of the most, when the anxieties and the fear were the highest, this very, very cozy game that gave us safety and repetitiveness appeared. And so even people who did not consider themselves players before started playing. Teacup that I mentioned, no particular reason why this specifically. I was going through the list of Wholesome games from last year, and I said it already is out. Very cute, very simple story of a frog that is missing ingredients for the party and needs to find them. And it's, again, there is some lack of abundance in the sense that the ingredients need to be found, but not they are going to be found, that there is a security. And like I say, a lot of cozy games, of course, do not have to have a very robust, a very complicated message or a story, like puzzle games like A Little to the Left, in which we just arrange things in a specific order, like books on the shelves and I don't know, nails in the box, in the toolbox, while a cat a little bit interrupts us. And unpacking, again, entire game is a puzzle game based on just unpacking, but what differs from probably non-cozy puzzle games would be that it does have this aesthetic, right? That's very cute and very helping us. Second, Dissonant. This is where things are getting a little more interesting, because there are aesthetics that are cozy with story or elements that are definitely not cozy. So there's going to be themes of trauma or difficult emotions and so on. A very interesting example is going to be dysphoria. Dysphoria has maybe not what we would call about entropy, about transition, right, and the stress of it. It is definitely not having all of the cozy elements, like aesthetics that we talked about, but it has the safety, the gameplay safety, while very difficult emotions and very sharp, surprising colors that are not that safe. The Dragon Cancer, and in general, empathy games. I'm not a big fan of the name. There are some issues with it, but what we know as empathy games, so the games that are tackling very difficult topics, very gameplay easy, soft colors, soft shapes, and so on. But the topic is very traumatic and very difficult. And even Night in the Woods, that is not that dramatic as the other two on the list, but but has a darker story in it that is not necessarily cozy. Themes of mental health, depression, and so on, alienation, anger issues, but everything in a very cute packaging. And the last one of these three being situational coziness, being a moments of coziness in games that are otherwise not cozy, basically. And here, when I say games that are otherwise not cozy, I don't mean only mainstream, big budget action adventure games, but it looks like that. Good example. Very often it's going to be campfire, images of campfire, like in Tomb Raider or Witcher, who needs to meditate somewhere safe, all of these checkpoint places that are very cozy in that idea. And the most famous probably example of that coziness being that one tiny scene in oh my god, Uncharted 4, right, very high action packed, a lot of shooting, jumping, running, and so on. And in the middle of that, a very tender moment between a married couple who are, it is a little bit of in a cutscene, but we also can play Crash Bandicoot as Drake, and it gives us this warmth and this niceness between the characters. Yeah, and that's the gist for now of my theory of coziness. Like I said, here you can have the Aprily, the Polish Journal of Game Studies, is where we are doing the special issue. If you want to hit me about that, let me know, and go and submit. And like I promised, the games that have been cited, I think all of them, apart from maybe one that I've noticed on the way. And that would be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agata. Thanks for the dimensions mentioned for the cozy games. If audience has any questions, the same as in the previous session, just raise your hand and the mic will be brought to you. But I'm going to start with questions. Is that, what do you think is the kind of, what is the reason behind the popularity of cozy games these days? What is happening in the field of games because of?
I think that's kind of what I said, in a sense of our needs changed a bit from the we need to save the world and be the hero of our own story to we actually desperately need some, peace of mind and just be left alone and tend to our own gardens and have our home that has been, left by somebody to restore and so on. But I think that the more unstable the world is becoming, the more we are drawn to the safety in the cozy games.
Yeah. Yourself, do you play cozy games?
I do, but not exclusively. And I do have to admit that I do love studying them, and I think that they are fantastic. But I will not, turn down a Uncharted or other games that are more heavy duty. But I like to have a mix of a little bit of coziness and a little bit of not.
Do you think that the cozy moments in non-cozy games are part of the kind of rhythm design for those games, so that they are kind of managing the high activities?
Definitely. I think that it's actually a very smart way of bringing the player closer to the game, in the sense that what happens... sorry, I got a pop-up. What happens... when you are very, very, there's an action and you go and you fight, and then you have this moment to take a breath together with the character at the same time. That is what kind of brings you closer to the character, to the game, and kind of establishes maybe the immersion even more, right? Because it makes the same rhythm of your tiredness and your rest with the character.
Yeah. Any questions in the audience? Okay, I'm going to wrap it up with this question. How about gender in cozy games? Is there a kind of more female audience in cozy games? Like, do you have any data on that? Or how does it tie to that topic?
I think that there's kind of a stereotype that we have, that women would be brought more to that. Well, we know now that it's not exactly the case, because everyone plays cozy games. That is kind of more well distributed. But yeah, definitely, I would go more with the non-players would maybe start with cozy games rather than, something very, Assassin's Creed, right? But I don't think that is very just that gendered in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you for the insight and the analysis, and
Thank you
hope
so
to see
much.
you soon.